It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. On the show this week, friendship in the fandom. We're going to talk about the Star Wars movies and how important friendship is in the films, and then a little bit about the friendships that you make within the fandom. It's a slow news week this week. Quite a bit of listener feedback we're going to get to. Lots going on in the world. Let's not waste any more time and get right to this week's show. I'm really glad that you're with My Nerd World. And again, mynerdworld.net. That is the website for all things My Nerd World and to find the science fiction space opera series written by this very host, EMBARK. All available at www.mynerdworld.net.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now, you're coming together. Is your undoing. Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny.
The Force will be with you.
Always.
It is the Star Wars podcast here on My Nerd World, and I am your host, Jon Justice. So glad that you're with the show again this week. It's been a really difficult week, and many of you have reached out to me doing the show, living here in Minneapolis, and asked how I'm doing. I'm doing just fine, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. I don't want to spend the entire show talking about it, but a part of the theme for this show, is friendship. And I know that I have not had the privilege of meeting most of you who email and leave comments on YouTube to this show week in and week out. And I hope one day I can. I hope that if Celebration goes off later this year, which it looks like it may still, I'm planning on being there. I had wanted to do the podcast there, but I don't know if that's going to be able to happen just because I haven't seen them put up anything yet about scheduling that because of the fact that it's kind of still up in the air due to the pandemic. But I hope that one day I can. But I do consider you my friends, is what I'm trying to say. We're all friends in the fandom, and there's something special about meeting people through Star Wars and making new friends. And that's what the show is going to be a bit about this week. I'll talk a little bit about that, a little bit about friendship in the movies, and then we're going to get into listener feedback. And that's going to be the bulk of the show. It's going to be rather brief just because it is such a slow news week. That and this is awesome, right? So let's get positive for a moment in the midst of all the chaos right now. I'm looking at my TV in my office /studio /bedroom. And we are 46 minutes away from the SpaceX rocket carrying the U.S. astronauts into space to the International Space Station. The first time since 2011 that we have launched Americans into space, and the first time a private company has launched people into space. I'm not going to lie, I'm tearing up a little bit just thinking about it. I'm so excited for this moment. My love of science fiction and space, travels beyond just Star Wars and science fiction in my writing. I've always been captivated by spaceflight, and I've never had the luxury to see a space shuttle launch. I've had the luxury to touch a space shuttle, having been to California and to the Science Center there, and having seen the shuttle there, and to Washington D.C. as well. At the moment, it looks like it is still ready to go. They are talking about potential of rain, so hopefully it still launches today. There was a delay earlier this week, so I'm super excited about that. About that happening here in a little bit, and it'll be a nice way to kind of take our mind off of everything that's happening right now. So the title of the podcast this week is Friendship in the Fandom, and I'll explain a little bit more of that coming up in a moment. I had the opportunity to appear on a friend of the show, Edwin Lowe. He has a new he's had it for a little while. He's trying to grow it. It's a YouTube channel called The Lowdown Show, and he's been listening to the show for a long time. And we were finally able to make it happen, and I was able to go on his show and do an interview, and I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up in a moment. But again, sort of dovetailing off of Friendship in the Fandom, and so many of you who I've heard from throughout the years, and sometimes it's funny to see, you don't hear from people in a while, and then they pop back up again, and you instantly see a name, and you go, oh, hey, I haven't seen them in so long, and it just means the world to me, and I feel like I have a whole group of friends that I've never had the opportunity to meet before. But that's what the Star Wars films have been about, right? And that's what really, to me, makes a movie like The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and specifically The Rise of Skywalker, the role that friendship plays in those films. The tense friendship and the growing interest between Han and Leia with Chewbacca. And let's throw Solo in there too, right? The friendship that develops between the core group in Solo. And let's go ahead and put Rogue One in there. The friendship that develops between the Rogue One team, despite, spoiler alert, they all die in the end. It's a part of the fabric of Star Wars. And that's what makes Return of the Jedi so much fun, right? Is when we get the whole group together again. And you could start with A New Hope too, right? It takes a while for the group to come together, but there is a friendship that grows, but it really gets its due in Return of the Jedi. And I haven't talked about this aspect of The Rise of Skywalker yet, but it really is an aspect of The Rise of Skywalker that, in my opinion, makes that movie so special to me, is that camaraderie and the friendship of the core group of Chewie, Finn, Poe, Rey, and C-3PO going on this adventure together. The moment at the start of the film when they leave Asian Kloss is it's fantastic. The soaring music, they all get in the cockpit together. Rey looks over and she says, "Yeah, it is," and you just assume that Chewie is saying, "I'm glad we're all together. It feels good that we're all together." Again, it's a part of that movie that makes it special, makes it fun with the dialogue they share, but also makes it heartbreaking as you move through the film, and Rey has to go on her own journey with Kylo Ren and Ben Solo, and Finn trying to reach out to her, and the tension between Finn and Poe. Friendship in the fandom itself and friendship in the films itself is a vital component to the fabric of Star Wars, and I pray that through all these difficulties that we're going through right now in the world, that when the viruses burn out and the dust settles from all the violence, and we are able to look back on this year, because we will be able to, and we begin to look ahead towards new Star Wars streaming content, live action content, and new Star Wars films, that maybe, just maybe, the fandom will treat each other a little bit better than they have throughout the course of these past few movies. I pray that's the case. These are just films, right? They are just movies. They do mean a lot to us. Let's not discount that. They do mean a lot to us, but they are just movies. But it goes beyond those films when you talk about the fandom and all the positivity that surrounds Star Wars and the bringing of people and families together. It's the fabric of Star Wars, and what makes it so incredibly special and meaningful to so many of us.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
speaking of friendship, I feel like I've made a new friend. As I mentioned at the start of the show, Edwin Lowe has been a listener of the show for a long, long time, and has taken it upon himself to start his own YouTube channel called The Lowdown Show, and you can find it Lowdown Show. You can find it on YouTube. I have put a link to this particular episode in the notes for the podcast. They're in the notes on YouTube as well. But Edwin had invited me quite a long time ago to come on his show, talk about the podcast, talk about Star Wars, and talk about my EMBARK science fiction novels. And we were finally able to make that happen in this past week. And so I really enjoyed my time talking with Edwin on the Lowdown Show, and giving him the opportunity to continue to work on his show and his interviewing skills, and it was just a lot of fun. And we actually found out that we had a lot in common. That wasn't all that surprising, but surprising as well. Living in the same city that he lives in, the city that I used to live in for years, but he didn't even know that I was living there doing a radio show at the time. So it was a really great time. I love being on other shows. Being a talk show host and being on this end of the microphone, I really, really enjoy when I get the opportunity to be interviewed by other people. So again, head into the notes for the podcast, look at the notes on YouTube, or just go to YouTube and look for Lowdown Show, and you can check out this 24-minute conversation that Edwin and I had. I really, really, really enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll take time to go and check it out.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's get into listener feedback this week. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment on YouTube. There's a couple of comments here that are not related to Star Wars, but I did want to share them with you because I appreciated you writing in to ask how I was doing. And the first one comes from Edwin, who I was just talking about. Edwin writes, "Hello, John. I was going to check on you because of the Floyd situation. I saw your Facebook and glad that you're far away from it. I am. It's weird because we had some violent protests in downtown Phoenix. We're thousands of miles from Minneapolis, but we're getting it here. I live in Maricopa County, so I'm far from it. Blessings, Edwin." Yeah, it's I was living in Los Angeles during the time of the Rodney King verdict and the riots that took place, and this has superseded that by leaps and bounds, tragically. Thankfully, we are very far away. We live in about 19 miles north of the city, in a city called Blaine. There's been some concern about disturbances in the suburbs, but thankfully, I feel confident enough that we are far enough away to where we shouldn't be impacted by it. Friend of the show, Miranda, writes this. Got one Star Wars comment, but also non-Star Wars. Absolutely nothing to do with Star Wars, but John, I hope you're doing well and that you're okay and that your family is safe, because it's absolutely horrific what is going on right now in Minneapolis. That should not be going on in any city of the United States or any part of the world at all. It's disgraceful and sad, and I hope that it doesn't keep going any longer than it already has. All this senseless violence is doing nothing but hurting. That's all I want to say, and I hope you are well and stay safe and healthy. We are, as I just mentioned, Miranda, and to you listening. Sadly, that email came several days ago, and we've had 4 days of violence now, and it's tough. It's a tough thing to see when you see just so many lives just ruined and decimated. It's very, very tragic. All right, so let's get to more Star Wars. Miranda writes this. Even though A New Hope was the Star Wars that started it all, in my opinion, it's all thanks to The Empire Strikes Back that the future of it continued. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but in The Rise of Skywalker, when Rey and Ben are fighting inside the Death Star, where there were some moves that kind of mirrored the duel standoff between Luke and Vader once Rey attacked Kylo after he crushed the Wayfinder. I did notice that. And look, I watched, and I talked about this before the Empire Strikes Back episode, but it is just such a fantastic film. And so is The Rise of Skywalker. I won't do it. I really want to. It's so hard. I've actually been trying to figure out a way, what I'm referring to as my love of The Rise of Skywalker. I've been trying to figure out a way to channel my love of that movie, and I haven't decided what I want to do yet. There's been podcasts that do entire shows on a minute of film, and they basically, there's a Rocketeer one. My brother worked on the Rocketeer. He used to do special effects work for movies and TV, and did a lot of work for the Rocketeer, which is a fantastic film. And there was a podcast out there where these two guys would basically break down 1 minute of the film in each particular show. Because of my love of The Rise of Skywalker, I really want to do something special to channel that. It's the same thing that propels me to want to do my podcast. I like to talk about things that I'm passionate about, and I just love that movie so much. I haven't quite decided how I want to channel my love for that film. Maybe if you have any ideas, if you have, maybe an additional podcast or a section of the podcast, but I would be very curious to hear from you on if you have any ideas of how what you would be interested in hearing from me about The Rise of Skywalker, if you would be at all. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Leave a comment up on YouTube. Cortana, and I hope I'm saying that right. I'm assuming it's Cortana. Cortana, which is an awesome name, by the way. It might be Cortana, but either way, that sounds like a name I would have put in one of my EMBARK stories. As a matter of fact, I might steal it. Cortana writes this: I just want to say that I really love the show and appreciate your positivity about Star Wars in the midst of this toxic fandom. I have one question. Are you ever going to do a podcast episode defending the sequel trilogy as a whole and addressing the common criticisms of it, such as it's a carbon copy of the original trilogy? Don't agree. It doesn't work as a trilogy. Don't agree. And stuff like JJ threw Ryan's ideas out the window to restore his original vision. Thank you so much, Cortana. I love that name. That is really awesome. Even if I'm saying it wrong, I still love it. I'll tell you what, I will do that. And what I've done is, for my prep, I put together all the emails in one note on my computer, on my Mac. I've highlighted this right now, and so I make sure I hang on to it. And I think, in the absence of any news coming out right now, maybe I will do just that in next week's episode. Plus, it'll give me the opportunity to talk about The Rise of Skywalker. Sounds like a good idea. Thank you so much for the email. All right, friend of the show, Brian Martin, says this. He always has interesting questions. You know about all of those thousands of Star Destroyers with the Death Star guns. Mm-hmm. A planet-destroying weapon needed a structure the size of the Death Star. So if Palpatine's followers have been working on a new fleet for 30 years, then the technology to build mini Death Star weapons had already been around before the Empire died. Is that right? If that's the case, then why did he have to go build the Death Star 2 in the first place and not just those Star Destroyers? Brian, I'll take that as a matter of a point of view. So if Palpatine's followers, right, have been working on a fleet for 30 years, perhaps you build the Star Destroyers, right, with an effort towards the mini Death Star weapons that only got completed in the last decade, right? So you spent the first 20 years building a fleet of new Star Destroyers, along with those first 20 years building up the technology for mini Death Star weapons, and then you implemented those and attached them in the last 10 years before their appearance in The Rise of Skywalker. See there? Check it out. I fixed the problem. By the way, that was not a thing that I was really like, ooh, that's awesome. I feel that way now. The only thing I wish, and I will say this about the Star Destroyers, right, in The Rise of Skywalker, I really do love I love the switch up. You can't do another super weapon, but you want to keep with the theme of Star Wars, and you want to echo previous movies. I thought it was pure. I'm not before. I do now. I think it's pure genius that JJ and Chris Terrio went with this idea to go with thousands of Star Destroyers with mini Death Star tech. I think that's awesome, right? And we have a precursor to that because we had that with the battering ram cannon, right? That was miniature Death Star tech from The Rise of Skywalker, which is a nice little little lead in, or a little look back to The Last Jedi going into The Rise of Skywalker. The only thing I would have wished is looking at some of the concept art from The Rise of Skywalker. There was concept art of massive hangars, right? Construction bays opening up on the surface of Exegol. and then light shining out from them and the Star Destroyers rising up from underneath. There was even some concept art of Kylo Ren in one of these hangars with rows of Sith troopers. That is the only thing that I wished we could have seen more of. I thought it was a cool visual to see the Star Destroyers breaking out of the surface of Exegol, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more extrapolation, right? Exposition of how that happened. I would have liked it more if it had looked more like Geonosis. Can I say more and more? If it looked more like on Geonosis when Jango Fett and Boba land and that hangar door opens up, it kind of spins open and it closes as he lowers Slave 1 into the hangar on the planet. I would have really liked to have seen that. The idea of massive doorways opening up and lights, industrial lights shining up, thousands of those shining up from the surface of the planet, and then the Star Destroyers rising from there. That's all the visual you need, right, to get the idea. Oh, okay, they've built these. I thought that the movie didn't do a good job of sort of explaining, well, where the hell did those Star Destroyers come from? You had to assume, but I think with a visual, you could have had a striking visual of that happening. And I would have loved to have heard, and I think it's in the, I think it might be in the art book. I'll have to look again. But I'd like to see the rationale of why. I mean, it might have just been a visual, and J.J. Abrams just liked the idea of the Star Destroyers breaking out of a surface, and he thought that was cooler than what I described. But I disagree. And now I digress. All right, one more lengthy email that comes from Susanna, and I appreciate this, or Susanna. Oh, I'll go to Susanna. I've been a fan of your show for about 2 years now. Wow, and I just butchered your name. I apologize. Susanna. We're going to go with Susanna. Just like the song. It has been so much fun to nerd out over The Last Jedi. I agree with you completely. It's such a masterpiece. And The Rise of Skywalker. I love Star Wars so much. Capital letters, exclamation point. I'm 51 years old, and I've been a fan ever since we first watched Star Wars back in 1977. I saw it for the first time in New Orleans and the second time at the Chinese Theater in L.A. Wow, that's awesome. I'm jealous. These films are my way of trying to connect with my 130 students in this new online learning because Zoom meetings are not working, right? We are not allowed to make it mandatory, so only a handful show up to Zoom meetings. Yeah, I've heard about this. I've heard about this as well. Let's see. It's hard not to be disappointed by the number, but even students I've had for several years in a row by choice are not coming. They don't really feel comfortable in the Zoom meetings, I think. It's hard to know what to do to make it better for them. I'm really new at this too. Also, we're not allowed to meet one-on-one with students either. Wow, that's really disappointing. So I can set up anything with the students who need extra help. I used to work through my lunch period with students all the time. Now I'm trying to do it through email, and it doesn't work very well. I miss the students and the school, and the school environment for teaching and learning. I hope we can go back sometime next year. So I came up with a plan to make a series of family films to share with my students. A little background. From the start of the first semester of the school year, I dress up in a Star Wars costume every Friday and do a little mini lesson on the Force and do a Star Wars minute, usually about 5 minutes plus, and then showed them a scene from one of the films. I also counted down the days and waved my lightsaber around in the halls, shouting Happy Force Friday, yelling out the number of days until Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, came out. Then after that, I only wore a Star Wars t-shirt on Force Fridays. It was funny because the kids missed guessing what costume I'd wear on Friday when I opened the door to the classroom. I assured them I'd dress up again on May the 4th and Revenge of the 5th. They were satisfied with that answer and wished me Happy Force Friday each week. It was adorable. Susanna, thank you so much for sharing your comments with me and your story. I think that's amazing, and I can think of no better way to wrap up this particular episode, especially when we talk about, friendship in the fandom and what Star Wars can do, even for teachers trying to go and reach their students, because, you need to have those good relationship with your students, right, in order to make that connection. So thank you so much for taking time, to you and to everybody else who took time to listen and email me this week. I really, really do appreciate it. And that wraps it up for this week. I know it's one of the shortest episodes I've probably ever done, but I want to watch this SpaceX ship take off. I'm assuming it's going to. I was a little bit worried. I was watching the news just a moment ago. And, okay, it looks like it's still a go at the moment. I have the sound off here at home. So, yeah, I definitely, all right, cool. Yeah, so it looks like it's going to take off here in a minute, and I've wrapped up the show just in time to do that. So, quick book plug, really quick. If you're looking for a fun science fiction read, classic tale of good versus evil about a group of 5 friends starting in EMBARK Book 1, who are about to make a shocking discovery that will be the only hope that humanity has in the middle of a planet-wide evacuation, even though they don't know it yet. That kicks off my science fiction space opera trilogy, inspired by the science fiction movies and books that I read as a kid, and the storytelling of George Lucas. EMBARK is a trilogy, 3 books, Book 1, Treasure in Darkness, and the newly released Vanishing War, that is good for all ages. Adults will enjoy it. It's written by an adult who really hasn't matured beyond the age of 16 years old. That would be me. But kids from 11 years old to kids over 70 all love the book. And if you haven't picked up your copy yet, I would really appreciate it if you would support my efforts to be a successful author and this show. This is how you support the show, because I don't do Patreon. Go to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, and pick up your copy of either book in paperback, ebook, or audiobook. Or you can go to mynerdworld.net, and that'll link you right to the Amazon page. If you've purchased the books, thank you. If you haven't left a review, please do so right now. I need reviews for all the books. That would really, really help me to continue to grow my career as an author. I need to have reviews of the books, all 3 books, but especially books 2 and 3. So if you haven't left a review yet, please go and do so. It really, really would help me out. Pick up a copy of the books for you or a friend. And I guess that's it. mynerdworld.net. Go to Amazon.com and look for Jon Justice and EMBARK and pick up your copy of the books. Have yourself a fantastic week. Stay healthy. Stay safe wherever you are. We're going to get through this. Everything happens for a reason. And I will be back again next week, and we'll do what Cortana asked. We'll talk a bit about defending the sequel trilogy and addressing some of the common criticisms. All right, have yourself a great week, everybody, and talk to you very soon. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.